everybody, and welcome to Let's Pick This Up Next Week, where we, as two therapists, talk all about what goes on in our minds, what we think about therapy, and kind of the world at large. I am Dee, and we're joined by our favorite co-host, DJ.
Hey, everybody.
Well, I am super excited because it is graduation time for a lot of people. And I don't know about you, so I take on, in Ohio, they're called CTs, counselor trainees, which we were all counselor trainees. That's how you become a counselor. You have to be a trainee to become a counselor, at least in the state of Ohio, as we've talked about before. So they're graduating. Like this week is finals week for a lot of them, or if not, it was last week. And they're graduating and walking and doing all these exciting things. So so kind of inspired us to want to chat about careers advice and beginning counselors in the field and in the world and all of that lovely stuff. So, DJ, what do you remember about your graduation? Because your graduation was a semester after mine, because we talked about that. You had to do both programs. I only did one.
Yes, I did both. What do I remember about graduation? Or what do I remember about my advice that I was given for like the career?
Well, we can get into it. What do you remember about actual graduation? You walked, right?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
You did too, right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. I thought you did. Because I remember I went to you guys' graduation. Since most of you graduated the quarter or semester before me. It was great. I think graduation was because it was there was three of us that were bi-programmal. So it was nice to be able to sit with them and walk together, and we got to have our ceremony outside. I think yours was indoors.
It was,
yeah, because it was in the summer, so it was nice outside. So it was great. It was a really I'm glad I went. And grad school, our master's program was so cool because we did get to go all the way through with, people that we got to know very well, for 2 years. So it was nice to watch you guys graduate and then, to be able to go to participate in my own ceremony.
It was so cool because it wasn't a cohort model, but it kind of ended up that way with like a core group of probably 10 or 12 of us pretty much were joined at the hip for 6 semesters.
Yeah. I remember when we first started and one of our professors talked about that the incoming class of mental health and school counseling students was too large, she thought. Because I think that between the two programs, there were over 30 of us. And it was apparently the first time that there'd been that amount. She was not happy about it. But it turned out okay for all of us, I think.
It did. I often think about the butterfly effect that's had on my life because not to get too much into my own stuff, but I started high school really young. And so when I was applying for grad school, I graduated my undergrad right after I turned, what was I? 20. Yeah, I was 20 when I graduated with my bachelor's degree. And I applied to a bunch of different programs because I'm like, I don't know what the heck I'm going to do. Got accepted into quite a few. Didn't get accepted into one. That was my first choice. Didn't get accepted my first choice. And I just remember just kind of picking and saying, you know what? BG sounds fun. Bowling Green State University, let's go. Why not? And it just completely changed my life because the folks that we went with are some of my greatest friends to this day. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's really cool. And the same professor, I'll never forget, Dee, is the activity that we had to do with the fold the paper for as many decades as you have. And because you just folded yours right in half. And then just had two sides, and she would just it's not possible. It's not possible that you how are you in grad school and you only have two of those 2 decades? And you're like, it's possible. That's where I'm at. Yeah.
I saw my first clients before I could have my first legal drink.
I remember. Yeah. I remember your 21st birthday.
We don't need to get into that. But
it was so, my experience was so, I'm not going to talk about that. My experience was was so different because opposite of you, I was one of the older people in the program. So I didn't come in to grad school till I was 39. And, I had not planned on being a mental health counselor at all. I graduated from BG for my bachelor's in psychology. Then I waited like 11 years or something before going back to a master's program. And I wanted to be an occupational therapist. I applied to a doctorate program in occupational therapy. I didn't get in. And I was like, do I want to wait till next year and apply again? Or do I want to apply to other schools? And I talked to some friends about it, and my friends were like, you're getting old. I wouldn't
I'm
wait a year.
supportive.
Yeah. And so I wouldn't wait a year, see what else you want to do. So I applied to BG for the school counseling program and got accepted. And then when I went to go talk to my advisor, and she said she had done both, then I was like, oh, well, how do I do that? Sign me up. I'm an overachiever. So I really thought I was going to be a school counselor. I think I probably mentioned that in other episodes, but what was also cool for me was the fact that you guys were only 20 years younger than me. And I could have very much been in the program and been a loner, and like not had the friends that I've made because I was so much older. But it was so cool to be like, even though I was so much older, we were just such a everybody was such a welcoming, fun group that I never felt like an outsider because I was, so much older than everyone.
It was a great group, and we'll get into like the actual meat of it. But before I forget, do you remember the T-shirt that I designed that we
Still
got
have it.
from everybody?
I still
I
have it
do
hanging
too.
up
I
in
was
my
just thinking like,
closet.
mine's in my closet over here. I'm like, oh, I
Yeah.
should have grabbed it.
Yeah.
But it was great. I mean, like it literally had, we had to go through a few revisions because a couple of things were not appropriate.
I remember.
The first time around. But it was hysterical and just, so many things that I think really just like encapsulate a really great, because grad school is freaking tough, like so tough. You can't do it by yourself. You absolutely can't.
Right. Yeah.
So
It was such a
we're
good time.
certainly
One of the
very
best
fortunate.
one of the best times of my life, and 10 years later still.
Yes, and that's the wild thing. So it's been a decade since it's been a decade for you too, a decade minus a semester, but same thing. And I will never forget. And one of the things that I think of when I work with my CTs who are graduating, the CT I work with is graduating like this semester, this weekend, they will walk, and that's very exciting. And so it got me thinking about this book that we had to read all of those years ago when we were baby counselors. And it was The Gift of Therapy by Yalom, who was just like touted probably as like the best thing since sliced bread in grad school, but I absolutely get it. And so if you have never read the book, it's The Gift of Therapy, an open letter to a new generation of therapists and their patients by Dr. Yalom, MD, who at the time of writing this had like 45 some odd years being a counselor. And I remember thinking like, how in the world do you do this for 45 years? I'm still wondering that. Just as a by the by. But there were so many good takeaways. So I want to talk about the takeaways from the book. And then actually, we reached out to a lot of the folks that we went to school with and got some of their advice for new people in the field, and not just counselors. Like everything on here is pretty applicable to like life in general, which I think is really cool. It's just coming from a bunch of counselors, which is like a warm hug of advice, it's from counselors. So one of the things that this book taught me, and there's like a couple of like main points, but one of them was talking about the here and now, which in therapy is the concept that like you talk about the relationship occurring at that moment. So you're not just talking about, well, how did that make you feel? And well, then what happened? And, all that kind of stuff, which is very important parts of therapy. But you're also picking up on the way that someone's foot is tapping when you talk about a certain topic, right? That's the here and now. Focus on the here and now is focusing on the relationship between you and the client. So to say, you're feeling distant, or I feel like we're not connecting as much, to focus on the actual relationship itself is very therapeutic. And that is something that takes so much courage to do. but I was really glad I learned about it as far as discussing the here and now with our clients. DJ, do you talk about the here and now with your clients?
I don't think I use that terminology, but for sure. And I think that, because I do pay attention to, more than like the words that they're saying, but how they're saying, and and also connecting it with, things that they've said before. So here and now connected to other things and kind of like, and I like to, like when people are trying to make decisions and stuff, like it's never for me to like give them advice since we're talking about advice, but I will point out things that they've said. Like I just want to point out that like consistently over this period of time you've said the same thing, so that can help them to be like, oh, this must be something that I really do want, or something like that. So I kind of connect the two together.
I love that. And I don't think I ever told you, because maybe in like December or something, we were connecting about something, and I happened to bring up a client I was frustrated. We weren't even like really staffing or, discussing a case, but I happened to bring up a client that I was frustrated with the current progress. And I was like kind of trying to check myself. And you mentioned that you gave me this lovely little line that I ended up using in session with her, and it went so well.
Nice.
Do you remember what the line was that you gave me?
No, to remind me.
It was, I'm gonna not say it as beautifully as you did, but basically like, do you want to talk about this again in a year?
Right.
Because we've been talking about it for 6 months. Do you want to talk about it for the next 6 months? Like
Right.
where you at?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it did in a session that I had with somebody. I mean, it made a huge difference because she hadn't realized that, like, she'd been struggling with that same issue for so long and had not made any headway.
Yeah. For this person, I mean, I won't say it's because of that intervention, but this person had a huge change. I mean, very similar, had the same old. And I found I was getting bored and frustrated in our sessions because I'm like, I'm not being effective. I don't know how to be effective. I would not frustrated at her, because people take their time, but I became frustrated that like I'm not being the most effective counselor I can be if we're not making progress.
Right. Yeah.
One thing I love about the here and now as well, and I don't know, did I ever share it on the podcast about the client who bored me?
No, I don't remember.
It's my favorite story to tell. Like, it's not a story that actually happened. To tell beginning counselors, because it's the perfect example of using the here and now, in my opinion. And part of it is like using your relationship with the client as a method for understanding how they engage with the world, right? So if a client is terse and easy to fly off the handle with me, chances are that's how they are in the world outside of the therapy room. People bring their humanness to session. And so I remember I had a client, this was so long ago, this was probably one of my first clients when I started working like actually in the field, no longer practicum, no longer internship. And I remember this client bored the crap out of me. And I feel awful for saying this because I was like, I would just yawn during her sessions and I couldn't stop. I was like, okay, I'll see her first thing in the morning. Nope. I'll see her after I have a coffee. Nope. I will see her on, like I tried everything. Like maybe I'm just tired that day. I don't know. And I remember bringing it to my supervisor that I'm like, how do you stifle yawns? Because I felt awful. And my supervisor at the time was just incredible. And she goes, she's like, what's the person like? What's your client's presenting problem? And I'm like, she just struggles with a lot of social relationships. She gets taken advantage of a lot. So she just like doesn't really connect with people and just makes a lot of, decisions that aren't super helpful for her in that way. And my supervisor goes, so she can't connect with people. And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, do you think that she's not connecting with you? And I'm like, no, because I'm perfect, obviously. Like, what? No, but I heard her and I was like, oh my God. So I'm like, so I realized it was my client was bringing her same self to session as she brings to the people she tries to make social connections with. And I'm literally paid. I'm literally paid to sit there and to care. I care as a human, but like I'm paid to care. And if I'm struggling to engage, chances are someone out in the world is going to as well. And so that supervisor walked me through, and it was terrifying to, in a much nicer way, tell my client, I'm so bored because you're a very surface person with me. Like, there's depth to you. Let's bring it out. I didn't say it like that,
Right.
right? But it was incredible. And I think it really, really changed the course of our working relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I'm trying to remember, I really do think it was one of the workshops that I went to at the most recent, at the conference we presented. That was at OCC.
That was All Ohio Counselors
Yeah.
Conference. Yep.
One of the presentations was about what like getting back to the basics of counseling, and that what we're doing really is modeling what a healthy relationship is. And and I really like to think about, like, we're just having a conversation. We have like some skills and some techniques and some psychoeducation and all these things that we can add to the conversation. But, like, really, it's two people who are having a conversation, and we're really modeling like what a healthy relationship should look like. So they can take that, into their own life where maybe they hadn't had a healthy relationship before. And I feel like that's kind of been my
I love that.
foundation anyway. Like, I work with people who, have never been able to stay in therapy before, because, like, they haven't felt seen, or they haven't felt heard, they haven't felt understood. And, and that's all I'm here to do, is to understand you and see you and hear you.
Absolutely. I think our job as therapists is to create a safe space in which people can sit and examine
Mm-hmm.
and decide if, what, when, how, or not
Right.
to change anything.
Right, right. And to feel not judged. I mean, so many people that felt like they were judged by therapists before, and I'm like, I promise you, like, I'm not judging you. It's not my life. Like, I mean, I can't judge you. Like, this is you and your life.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And that's actually one of the other things that Yalom hits on in The Gift of Therapy, is to talk about the importance of the therapeutic
Mm-hmm.
relationship, right? Like, we know of all of the things that are things that we have an impact to. What matters more than the techniques that we choose? What matters more than the counseling theory that we're pulling from? What matters more than any of that is our relationship with the client. That's
Mm-hmm.
what provides, even almost as much as the client's own hope and their ability to
Mm-hmm.
change. It's equally important that there is a perception of a close therapeutic relationship. So
Right.
the client's perception of it is vital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I always like to,
I've always
work to empower, like, I really want to empower my clients to, like, feel like they have a voice. And and also why I do, phenomenological research. But I always, like, try to ask questions. Instead of, I do psychoeducation, I want to do that, but I always want to ask, like, questions so that they can, like, really get to thinking about what they're saying. And a lot of times I hear, like, DJ, you ask the best questions, and they'll say, like, that's why they pay me the big bucks. Just because, like, I really, what is it? I'm trying to say. I mean, I really want to, like, I think, like, also, like, they're the expert in my mind in their own life, right? And, like, that's why when they say things like that, like, I want to go back to them. Like, I might be asking a question, but, like, they're the ones that are, like, coming up with the difficult answers that maybe they couldn't have found before they came to therapy.
absolutely, they're the ones doing the
Mm-hmm.
work, I always tell folks, there's 168 hours in a week, and you're with me for maybe one of them,
Mm-hmm.
maybe
Right?
one every 2
Yeah.
weeks. The real work
Mm-hmm.
starts when you walk out the
Yeah.
door. That's where life happens. It's easy to do things in
Right.
therapy. It's harder to bring them to life.
Right.
And then the last thing, we won't dive too much into it because we've already talked about it in another episode, but using self-disclosure to improve
Mm-hmm.
therapy. Yalom was a kind of a believer of, like, it's human and it's
Mm-hmm.
normal for our clients to wonder about
Right.
us. And so you work with a different population. I'm like, he didn't really work with, I don't think, at least, very, very dangerous people. I could be completely misremembering. But it talks about, just the importance of giving some level of disclosure
Mhm.
and connecting with the person in that way.
Yeah. And I think like it depends on the person, like you really learn when you get to work with somebody like who feels more comfortable with you, like being able to see you as a person and who needs to see you as like a therapist. So I mean like, they all know, right, what your role is, but like how much of your person they want to see and how much personality. I don't think that like it's definitely not the same across the board. Like you really have to know like what that person's comfortable with. There's some clients that I've worked with for a while, like even a year, that I don't self-disclose that much with at all. And some who,
Mm-hmm.
I might even talk about my dog or, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that goes to, again, one of these lovely little points. I just realized that there's bullet points on the back
Mm-hmm.
of the cover. Is to create a new therapy for each
Mm-hmm.
patient. Y'all, I'm using the word patient, but every session, every person is different. I've never done the same intervention with the exact same outcome
Right.
twice.
Yeah, for sure.
It just
Mm-hmm.
hasn't happened. But also things like let the patient matter to you, acknowledge your errors. I think it's
Oh
really good
yeah.
when we
Mm-hmm.
show our flaws. Almost never make decisions for the patient.
Right. He
Yep.
says almost never.
I pretty
Almost
sparingly.
never.
Almost in parentheses, yes, almost never. Which is true. We really shouldn't be,
Right.
but there are times where like I've been called upon by a person I've worked with a long time to
Mm-hmm.
say, what would you do in my shoes? And, in some situations at
Mm-hmm.
some points I'll say, I am not you,
Mm-hmm.
but
Right.
from, if this were me plopped into your situation,
Right.
here's what me as D
Right.
would do. Which is not
Right.
you.
Yeah. I've done that with like if there's situations where I feel like someone's, just like, you can see, right, that they're not in a great situation for them and for themselves. And after I've worked with them for a while, I've used an analogy like Clash of the Titans. I don't know, Dee, if you ever saw the original Clash of the Titans, and it was like
No.
from the early 80s. Harry Hamlin was in it. I don't even know if you know who that is.
I
Yeah.
don't know who that is. You had to explain to me who Doogie Howser was in grad school, just as a by the way.
So,
So no, I don't
so
know who
in
that
the
person is.
original, did you see the reboot? I didn't watch the reboot because I love the original so much.
No.
But in the original movie, there is Zeus is, like the boss, and the boss god. Anyway, he has like a coliseum, and he has like figurines where he wants like the people on Earth to like move to or be to or whatever. So he'll pick them up and move them. So like with a client who knew the movie, I'm just like, if this was Clash of the Titans, I would totally pick you up and put you somewhere else if I could.
That was such a long analogy for the payoff.
Right, it had to do it to you because you don't know the movie. Who is my age
No,
knew the analogy. Like he got it. Sometimes my younger clients don't get,
why
like,
did
I'll use Fraggle Rock analogies and they're like, DJ, I don't know, you're old people.
perhaps, I don't know, figure out what the youth are talking about
Right.
and work
Hmm.
that way. Um,
The youth.
but to use the
Uh,
youth, I had to, just unrelated. I heard a new expression the other day. I literally had to like ask people who were like way more cool than
really.
I was. I'm like, what does that mean?
Cool.
And I'm like, they're like, use context clues. And I'm like, of course I use fucking
Right.
context clues. But like, I don't know where it
Mm,
comes from, and that's why I don't
right.
get it.
Yeah.
So
What,
anyway,
what was it?
but it was keep it a
Oh yeah, I
bean.
don't. I don't know.
Just like, hey, like let's keep this a
Like
bean.
a bean? Like a baked bean? A pinto bean?
Bro, this was exactly my thought process. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, when we spill the beans, we tell
Hmm.
people like secrets. But keep it a bean means like keep it real, like keep it
Oh yeah.
100.
No, I don't even like that. That seems like
So,
I would never use it. I did
so,
use sus today, but I think
so
that's
that, you know,
is that
it's,
yeah, is that still new?
I mean, sus
Yeah.
is pretty, it's not
Hmm.
new, but like sus is pretty, that's
Yeah.
good. Yeah. Um, so I have some, not from young
Uh-huh.
people, but, or not, they're people that we went to grad school with. So they've been doing
Hmm.
this a while. They're not old. of what a lot of us said for advice. So, DJ, what did you think? What is the best or worst advice you've gotten in your life or in your career?
Thought of something earlier, and now the only thing I'm thinking of is the brochure that comes with the when you get your license in California,
No.
which was not the best advice, which was advice that I was like, it's sad that this has to be given. Psychotherapy never includes sex. Yeah. So
That's awful. That's
it
really
is
good
it is
advice.
very good advice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For
Right.
those that need
Right.
it.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
I think the worst advice that I think we tell people in
Mm-hmm.
general about anyone who gets into like the helping field is you don't get in this field to make money.
Right.
And I'm like, what a way to disempower an
Right.
entire field about advocating to be paid what
Right.
you're worth.
Right.
Like,
It is bad. And I think that comes from, like, I remember when I was in my bachelor's for psychology and being told the same thing. Like, you can't do anything with a bachelor's degree in psychology, which also wasn't true. I had plenty of jobs with my bachelor's degree in psychology. Mm-hmm.
that's fair. I think another one that was really powerful to me is I don't remember where I heard this, who told, I wish I did, but I've since used it on folks who I think are really, really positive people. And I mean that to say like toxic positivity, like always looking at the bright side. Like I typically ask people if like something's really crappy, I'll ask like, do you want a reframe? Do you want a different way of looking at this? Or like, that's okay if not. But
Right.
anyway, so what was said is when we tell people be positive, what we're telling them is my comfort means more than your truth.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah,
So that was
that's
pretty
kind of like
good.
how I introduce my pronouns. When I
What?
introduce my pronouns, and I'll say that my pronouns are they, them, and not right. And I'll say
Oh,
that they, them, but I'll use he too. But they for my comfort, he for yours.
I don't think everyone knows what that means because I had someone
Mm-hmm.
approach me and they heard you say that and they were referring to you by
Mm-hmm.
he him, which as you
Mm-hmm.
said is fine. And then they clarified. They're like he prefers he him, right? And I'm like that is one of the things
Mm-hmm.
that they said.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Like so
I
you
confuse
confuse
people when
people.
I say it. Yeah. I think most of the time people are like, oh yeah, that's that made a point.
That's fair.
Um, Countertransference, I think, is something that is advice that I give because I remember in grad school when we talked about countertransference that I thought that's not going to happen with me. Like I'm not going to have any countertransference. My feelings aren't going to get in the way. So when I give advice to like new therapists or even or counselors or even some that have been working for me for a while, is that like countertransference is going to happen. It's not about like it's not going to happen because we're human. It's being able to recognize it and acknowledge it, and it's okay to talk about it. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is no shame in talking about what
Mm-hmm.
comes up for you.
Yeah.
Like, when we
Right.
work with people. No, I love that. Okay, so I have over
Yeah.
here some pulled up messages. So our friend Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, Dr. Rachel gave us some advice and she said, the best advice is I am allowed to turn it off when I'm not in session. You cannot pour from an empty cup. So setting boundaries is really, really important. And developing a self-care plan that works for you is really important.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
That's very, very true.
I, being such a black and white person, never understood the concept of self-care because like I literally think about when I hear the term self-care, I think about like bubble baths and painting your toenails. Like that for some reason's always been stuck in my head as like, oh, that's what self-care is. It took me forever to realize like, no. Because then I was just like, oh yeah, like remembering to like make time to eat, that's self-care. And I'm like, no, that's taking care of your
Right.
humanness. That's Maslow's
Right.
hierarchy of need. That's
Mm-hmm.
the baseline. Like self-care is like doing those things that help like make you feel better. So I love that, to find a self-care plan that works
I
for
don't think of
you.
self-care now. I think about the Black Panthers.
What? What are you in these references? I
Because
don't
the Black Panthers are the
understand.
people who founded the idea of, or the group that founded the idea of self-care. Yeah.
Okay.
And I just learned that recently, so it's still very much fresh in my mind.
That's fascinating. It's like echolalia.
Right.
And Dr. Rachel also says the worst advice ever been is productivity, which is a really tough thing. So as a lot of folks know, as counselors, we have to bill, we have to get paid for our services. It's not something that unfortunately like is just kind of innately given to anybody who needs it. So we have to bill a lot of times, whether that is direct pay, like self-pay from the client, or it's through insurance or Medicaid or whatever insurance organization. Rachel just talked about like you're still a counselor and you have your own needs, and like you're not owned by that number of direct billable hours.
Yeah, that's really, really tough. Because like if you work for a company, they need to be able to keep the lights on and have a department. Yeah.
Yep.
My productivity, we've talked about it. My productivity requirement is super high.
And I know, and we're both directors, and so I feel you. I have the job of enforcing productivity, and I just had to raise productivity at my organization, which I know was not a popular choice, but so then it becomes, how do I support them to that end? Like what can I do? What's in my control for that? So, but yeah, they're still humans. Like they got their own stuff.
It's true.
And also, I can't remember if Rachel said it because I'm skimming. Oh no, it's Jamie who said it. Jamie is the next person who sent us some advice. Who said, I feel like I have no advice because all of our friends were brain dead.
Right.
Because also they were asked this question less than 48 hours ago and just told like, can you give us some sage advice that's going to change the lives of our listeners? And they're all like, no. But they did it so good. But Jamie said, try not to take your work home physically or mentally.
It's a good one.
It is. Yeah. Do you take your work home physically?
I work from home.
You work from home.
But I don't take my patient sessions generally outside of my work day. So I do have some that can do a check-in with me, like as like, I went to a meeting or something like that. But all of my patients know that they're not gonna reach out to me for a crisis or anything like that. And no, I generally don't carry that with me. Some of the other, like as an administrator, that's the stuff that's harder to not take home.
For sure. Yeah. And I'm awful. I'm constantly, my work is always home with me. There's not a day where I don't have my work cell phone or my iPad, something that's connecting me to work. Although yesterday I took a whole day, put my phone in Do Not Disturb. And I literally have a function on my phone because iPhones, you can set different types of focus. I have one called Leave Me Alone, where only very select people and Snapchat are the only notifications that can come through. I have people that that's like Snap as, their main form of communication. So that's pretty much it. And it was awesome. But one tip I learned early on, and again, this was advice that I got from someone, this didn't come out of like me, was I personally have a commute and I love having a little bit of a commute. And they said, pick a point on your drive. And for me, there just so happens to be a stoplight in the middle of the farmland I drive through from my house to my office. And that's the light where I shift gears. So when I'm driving home, it gives me about 15 minutes to turn off work and then just become mindful of like, not self-loathing if I get stuck thinking about work, which is just like, nope, it's not work time. I'm not there. And then same thing in the morning. It gives me that kind of 15 minutes to like get mentally warm before I start thinking of like, okay, yep, got to do that. This is what my day looks like, yada, yada. And I'll tell you what, it works out because the cell phone service sucks there. So when I take calls on my drive home, they will always drop right around when I get to that light. And so I always just tell people, I'm like, hey, if the call drops, like I've reached my stoplight for like my mental game. So if it drops, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah, that's good. And sometimes it is that transition. I don't have a commute. And sometimes, just the energy of the day. can be hard, especially Fridays, usually at the end of the day, like it's a longer transition to like, cause I'm pretty introverted. And so, I've used a lot of people energy for the week and like, Friday night, I'm definitely more like, um, I'm not emotionally worn out, just like people energy worn out. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
peopled out.
So I have to stay aware of that. But if I have something I have to do, then I have to try and like rally to like, okay, let me get some more people energy from somewhere.
Yeah, I run out of
Mm-hmm.
people energy, that's for sure. And then I need to be what I call off exhibit. So I'm just
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
unreachable, unavailable. Okay, and then our friend Jenna sent us so much. It was amazing. And it made me cry, which made me so annoyed at her. It's like, bro, I didn't want to freaking cry. So I'll hit the high points of stuff that she had sent along. So she said, my undergrad professor talked about windows versus mirrors. If you're looking at a person's situation as applying it to your values, morals, resources, and what you would do, you're
Right.
not seeing that person. You're looking into a mirror. So you're not getting an accurate perception of them. You're not being present. And so you can't help them.
Right.
You're judging. To see a client through their lens, their values, their circumstance, you're looking through a window and you
Mm-hmm.
can actually be a
That's
resource for
great.
them.
That's really good. Mm-hmm.
I love that. Um, when I use the analogy of mirrors, I always say like, oh, like I'm going to hold a mirror up to you, aka I'm going to have you
Right.
see yourself. Um, it's really like lovely to hear in a different direction to say, am I
Mm-hmm.
as a counselor, am I looking at myself in
Right.
session or am I
Yeah.
looking through their
And I think
lens?
that's good because sometimes I know for me personally, like, I will see like, wait a second, I can see that it's more mirror and I need to take myself out of this, before I'm giving feedback.
Absolutely. And it reminds me, or it makes me think of, and Jenna's next point kind of hints on it too, is this lovely quote that I think about a lot, which is there's a difference between truly listening and waiting your turn to
Yeah.
talk. And I think as society,
Mm-hmm.
we wait our turn to
Mm-hmm.
talk, you know. Um, I actually just heard a great podcast, and DJ, I meant to tell you that I'm gonna send
Yeah.
you this podcast. um, And because I also think the comedian who was on it, you would
Yeah.
absolutely be obsessed with them. I'm obsessed with them. I need to go watch their Netflix special. It's Mae
I think I've
Martin.
heard of May
Um,
Martin. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah. Anyway, so she's got a great bit about like the snow globes. I don't know. It's a lot to get into, and she's a comedian, so I'll just not ruin her joke. But nonetheless, we spend a lot of times thinking if we're connecting to people that we're
Mm-hmm.
sharing parts of ourselves, and it's not. Sometimes people just need to
Right.
be truly
Right. Yeah.
listened
And I think
to.
learning how a person connects because not everybody connects the same way. And so if you're listening to somebody, you're learning in what way do they connect?
Absolutely. And that goes actually
Mm.
perfectly with Jenna's point. Said that she read a book called The Wisdom of Listening. And there was a line that said, it's not about you. And even to this day, this is her quote, that is my mantra. If I get emotionally charged at work with a client, clients are going to play out their unhealthy relationship pattern with you. If you take
Mhm.
it personal and engage in the tango, you're robbing them of the opportunity to gain insight of their unhealthy behaviors because you lost your cool
Right.
and engaged with them. They do not have the excuse to focus on what you did wrong, they then have the excuse, but if you learn to not engage and show care and concern, they'll have less distraction and only have their
Right.
own
Yeah.
behaviors to reflect on.
Yeah. I try to give my clients a safe space to feel all their feelings. It helps that I started out working like my first job after grad school was working at inpatient co-occurring drug and alcohol treatment. So it definitely helped because a lot of people had lots of emotions. So I was very early used to working with people who were mad, who were yelling, and not taking that personally. Where I know that some people really struggle with if someone is yelling during a session or swearing or whatever. And like, when I work with people in supervision, like, really helping them to work on like, this is not about you. So I think that when we have emotional response, we know that there's countertransference happening for sure. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Like
Mm-hmm.
something's coming up. Um, I work a lot with the criminal justice system. So I would say about 50 to 60%, maybe more than that actually, of the clients in my department and that I've worked with for my the
Mm-hmm.
longest portion of my career are
Right.
just as involved. They're convicted of a crime, and so they're often really, really, really good at what's called criminal thinking. But in my mind, it is a creative way to get
Right.
their needs
Right.
met, right? And if I
Right.
took it personally every time a client
Right.
lied to me or tried to manipulate me,
Right.
I would feel awful. But I have to think of it as like, this person has maladaptive ways of getting their needs met. I just happen to be an avenue
Right.
to meet that need. So
Right. Yeah.
don't take
And
it
I think
personally.
when
It's
you
not
take it
about me.
personal too, one of the things that I say often to people I'm supervising too is that we're counselors, we're not detectives. Like it's not our job to try and figure out like what the facts are. You know, we are working with a person who is coming to us with what they want to work on, and we help them with what they're presenting to us. We don't have to figure out, we're really not trying to be detectives. It's not what we're supposed to do. Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's such a good point. I've had a lot of people say to me, "Well, how do you
Right.
find out if a
Exactly.
client is lying? Like how
Right.
do you get them to tell you the truth?" And I'm like,
Right.
you make the space for it. If
Right.
they choose to lie, then
Right.
that's something's coming up for them. And that's usually
Right.
shame
Right.
or
And
fear.
if you want to find
So,
out how to make them not lie to you, something's coming up for you. Mm-hmm.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I've told folks in the past that like I
Right.
know that they're
Right.
100% they're not being truthful with me. I'm like, we can have this session and go in
Mm-hmm.
that direction. That's fine. Or
Right.
we
Yeah.
can
It's
change it
up to
up.
you.
Like you
Yeah.
tell me which direction
Yeah.
are we going? Um, I absolutely love that the base I work with can
Mm-hmm.
handle like reality therapy
Right.
because that's
Yeah.
the therapy I love to provide,
Mm-hmm.
my
Yeah. You seem that.
modality. Yeah. All right. Another great thing that Jenna said was um, advice from her dad, who's an amazing human being, said, "Do what you love
Mm-hmm.
and the money will follow." That's
Right.
good advice. Yeah. Um, I mean, I think like,
Mm-hmm.
the rest will
Yeah.
figure itself out. So,
Yeah. Jenna's a
okay. And then
director too. I think we've all
she
done
sent so much. It was
pretty
amazing.
good for ourselves.
Right? Yeah. Jenna's a director.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Rachel's a doctor.
Almost so
You're soon to be a
close.
doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So close. Um, Another thing that Jenna sent along is talking about check your ego at the door, which kind of goes along with what we've been talking about. And so thinking about like if you have goals for the client, you're
Right.
going to be frustrated. Don't think that like, I mean, I've dealt with counselors who are new and they work, a lot in substance use
Mm-hmm.
disorders for the majority of my folks. And they're like, my client
Mm-hmm.
relapsed. What did I do wrong?
Right.
I'm like,
Yeah.
whew, you
Right.
cannot take that with you.
Right.
You
Yeah.
absolutely cannot. We can ask ourselves, what can I do
Mm-hmm.
differently the next time? Or how will I, but at the same
Right.
time,
And
maybe
it's
the answer is
also assuming
nothing.
that because your client relapsed, that like, that doesn't mean that they're not going to be their goals of recovery. Yeah.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Sometimes what we do is plant seeds and we
Mm-hmm.
never see those seeds
Yeah.
come to fruition. Um, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but
It doesn't mean they didn't
that's all
get
right.
anything.
That's our job.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exactly, right? And in my opinion, I've always dealt with, or I deal a lot with clients who, they'll relapse and they'll come back to services. And some of them will say, like, I just feel like so bad. I don't want to talk about it. And I'm like, I'm
Right.
happy you are here
Right.
because you
Yeah. Yeah.
survived. You're here,
Yeah.
man.
Right.
That is
Yeah.
another opportunity and that's another day. So, okay. Another thing that Jenna sent that I absolutely love, so I'm just going to like fully read it because it's beautiful, is codependency is
Mm-hmm.
selfish. Early in my career, I focused too much on how something would make a client feel versus what they would need. I kept no, or oof, I thought I cannot speak. I thought I was keeping them happy, and that helps the client see that I cared and that they mattered. I would save them from the consequences because I didn't want them to go in the same shame spiral from one mistake. I would bend the rules a little because I didn't want them to think I didn't care about them. And when my clients felt good, I felt good. they would be so grateful I made an exception. And it felt like I was helping because it felt good to me too. I get to be the solution. I'm the person that gets that ish done. But that was selfish. Upholding consequence and boundaries does not feel good for me or the client. But I care about you so much, I'm willing to sit in this discomfort with you and uphold the consequences or boundaries so you can learn whatever lesson the universe is trying to teach you that's bigger than me. And they may be mad at me in the moment, but if they eventually come around and realize that someone can truly care about you and not enable is a priceless part of their journey and how they relate to the world and others.
That's great. Yes.
I love that.
Codependency is self.
I recently said to someone, because I was working with a staff member who is one of the floor staff, so like the 24/7 staff that keep the facility running in a residential facility. And they said to me, because I was like, you got to enforce these consequences, man. And they're like, but they made a mistake. Like it was a silly mistake. And I'm like, yes. And so the consequences, can, when we think about like a sanction degree, right? Forgetting, whatever, forgetting your laundry, for a while in the washer or dryer, it's simple mistake. You're not going to be kicked out of the program, of course, right? But I role play with them. I modeled for them what I would say to clients, which is like, I respect you so much that I am wired, that I feel a need to tell you when I see something that does not align with your goals. I would be doing you a disservice. I do not want to disrespect you and not show you what I'm here to show you.
Same point of view.
We kind of already talked about if you want to do it for one of your clients, or if you don't do it for, if you wouldn't do it for all, don't do it for a couple, right? Especially working in the justice system, a lot of people lose their jobs that way because that starts the slippery slope. And then don't ask your client to do anything you wouldn't do. Don't encourage them to do vulnerable things. If you're avoiding it yourself, the therapeutic relationship is the biggest determination of client success. That means the interactions need to be authentic. Don't suggest something easy that you haven't done yourself. Counselors' main role is to push themselves to be vulnerable on their own life so they can be the lighthouse for others. And the more we apply counseling techniques into our own life, we'll remember them better when we're using it, and we'll believe in them more.
That's true.
I love it. And then the last piece of advice that Jenna sent on was when she's feeling emotionally charged, asking herself, what would I tell a client to do right now?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
Yeah. It is. They've got such good advice. No one really gave us crappy advice, which, all right.
What's the bad advice they got?
Not a bad thing to have. No one really gave us bad advice. Oh my gosh. You say it depends, for a person who hates it depends a lot. Like go and like watch back some of these podcasts and like put a tally. You do say it depends a lot. You do. I'm holding a mirror up to you.
I mean, sometimes it depends, but it always doesn't. It depends.
Depends a lot. But well, I hope that anyone listening can glean something from this advice, because I know I certainly did. Even just reaching out to our friends like that was awesome. And if I could give one last piece of advice, it's reach out to your friends. Make a note to like call or text someone, or like send them a dumb meme or something that you haven't connected with in a minute, because that's the connection we all need. And congrats to the grads of 2024 and on to
next
whatever
semester.
Next big
Congrats to the 5 programmer people of 2024.
The people are just eking out. They got one more semester to go. They got this. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this week on Let's Pick This Up Next Week. And we hope you have a very wonderful week, and we'll chat with you all soon.